welcome back to the SwiftUI course. My name is Mank. Today we're going to learn how to animate our UI, and it can be your UI, it can be my UI, but in this case, since we have been applying a lot of effects such as scale, rotation, blend mode, and blur, let's learn how to animate them properly in this context. In order to do animations, we're going to use states, which is very similar to what you would do in React. So at the top of my document, right after the content view, after the first set of curly braces, I'm going to write commercial A state, and it has a capital S, very important. Var show is equal to false, which means that the state of our animation by default is inactive and it's not showing. Then let's make sure to resume this, and for any animation, we're going to need the action. So an event in which the animation starts. In this case, let's make it so that when we tap this card in the front, the animation is going to start. So we're going to go to the certificate view. Then we're going to add a new modifier called .tapAction, and then press enter. This is going to create tap action inside curly braces, and inside the curly braces we're gonna put self.show, which is the boolean that we have, and then we're gonna toggle it, meaning that it's gonna go back and forth between true and false. Notice that I'm using auto-completions a lot, and when I say press enter, it means that you select the suggestion for the auto-completion, and then you try to get similar code to what I have. Luckily for us, Swift is gonna tell you all the errors in your code in real time, and that's really useful. And the code is very readable and declarative, so you can easily see and spot what problems that you have with your code. Okay, so let's start applying some magic here. We're gonna start with the 3D rotation effect. And you can see that the number that we're interested in is 30 for the degrees. And so what we need to do is to apply the state. So if the animation is happening, apply one number. If the animation is not happening or is false, then apply some other number. So again, we're focusing on the number 30 here. And right before that number, I'm going to write show question mark. So is the animation showing question mark? And if it's showing, then we apply that number 30 for the degrees. And then after 30, I'm going to add a colon and then the number for when the animation is inactive, which is 0. So that's it. Now, if I click, you can see that it's switching back and forth between the two states. But obviously we want to have some beautiful transition, right? It's like Keynote. When you have the magic move, you have to set two states, the begin state and the end state, and you want the application to take care of the transition for you. Now that we have those two states, we just need to apply the animation property. So dot animation, again use auto completion, press enter, and here press dot. We have a bunch of presets, starting with the basic one. And the basic one is going to be very linear. So click here, voila, that's it. And just like that, you have your animation. Now we can definitely customize this animation. We can use Spring, for example. And this is going to bounce a little bit, as you can see. And then we can apply animations using the states elsewhere. So for example, the rotation effect as well. So show question mark, colon 0. So is the animation showing? Question mark. Set the angle when the animation is showing, or else, which is expressed in a column, then reset it back to 0. So now we have both rotation and the 3D effect at the same time. So let's do the same thing for the other two cards. So show question mark and then colon 0. Show question mark colon 0. And now you can see that it's applying to the second card as well. I'm going to add the animation, and this time I'm going to use basic, but inside basic I have a bunch of values that I can customize. So for example, the duration, colon, and I can set the duration to, let's say, 2 seconds to be much slower. So now you can see that the animations are happening at the same time, but also fully interruptible, meaning that midway when this one is happening, the other one is kind of like, oh, am I going next or back? So that's really interesting, and it can really create these amazing effects for your animations. On top of that, you can add another value called curve, and then dot ease in. So you have the typical ease in out, ease out. So for those who are unfamiliar with animation, in means the beginning and out means the end. And ease means that it's gonna be taking longer either at the beginning or at the end. So for ease in, you can see that at the very beginning it's slow, and then at the end it becomes a little bit faster. And typically ease in and ease out are the most popular animation curves. The reason is that spring is a little bit intrusive sometimes, and it needs to be done carefully because sometimes when there's a lot of bounce going on, it's too much. And linear is a little bit boring because it's not lifelike, there's no momentum. So usually you want to use ease out. And the duration, you don't want to go further than, let's say, 0.5 or 0.3. So with this and a refresh, so you have this really nice animation with different timing. I can even make it, let's say, slower, so that we have some momentum going on. Okay, so let's do the same for the background card. So show question mark 15, then 0. Show question mark 50, then 0. Then add the animation, again using basic, and we're gonna set a duration of 0.5, curve, dot ease out. Let's give it a try. So all 3 cards are moving. You can see here that the second card has a bit of a momentum, but the third card is following too closely to the second card. So we can maybe decide to make it either slower or faster. And it gives a little bit more momentum to our animation. Another one that I really like is called ease in out. So again, it's slow at the beginning and also slow at the end. So I'm gonna put this to both of them. And so I have this really nice result. Alright, so let's go for the blur effect. We're gonna apply show question mark, then 0. Show question mark, then 0. And we also need to apply animation. And we can also set default. The default, again, is really useful for linear animations. I mentioned earlier that the basic without any values in the parentheses is a linear animation. Actually, that's wrong. The basic without any values is just gonna have default values for duration and curve. And for those who likes to explore, you can command click the documentation. So click on basic, jump to definition, and here you can see the documentation for that specific function or method or property, and then you can see the default values for that. So in this case, the default value without setting anything is going to be 0.35 for the duration, and then for the curve is ease in out. So I can click the arrow left to go back. Going back on the topic of animation, so the default is linear. You're gonna see it's a simple blur effect, and this is useful for, like, let's say opacity, blur, things that does not need momentum. So I'm gonna apply the same thing for the title as well, and now I have this nice blur effect in the background while I'm focusing on the cards. The last thing I want to animate is the offset, which creates really interesting results. So here, for the card view, I'm gonna set show -400 column and then -40. And here you can already see that the card is moving even further. And I'm gonna do the same with the card view, the other one. So show and this one is gonna be -200 column -20. So we have this really nice 3D effect. Of course, if you're experimenting, you might want to disable, enable some values, some properties. So you can do that by commenting in programming. All you need to do in Xcode is do command / to comment, let's say, the 3D effect. And I'm gonna do the same for both of the card views. And now we have this animation. I'm gonna do the same also for the certificate view. So we have exactly what I have in my final app. The only thing is, I want to be able to customize the color of the card while I'm experimenting with the animations. So I can definitely try and add a background property, but it's not gonna work. As you can see here, it creates a new view on top of the card view, and that's not what we want. So what we can do is to bring those values right from the components and simply move them from the component outside of the component. So I'm gonna go to the component and I'm going to bring these 3 values. So the background, the corner radius, and the shadow. So I'm going to take these 3 values by doing Command X, taking out of the component, and bring them right here before offset. And I'm gonna put on both of them. And by doing so, I can customize the color. And by the way, the mind-blowing thing here is that all of these values are also animatable, such as the background color, right? So if I want to change from red to blue, I can do show ? and then color.red, column, and then color.blue. So now when I click, it becomes red and it does the transition for us. And I can even use one of my preset colors by removing the dot blue and do parentheses. Inside the parentheses, I just need to name my color. So background 8, let's say. So now, just need to play this. Sometimes this is not gonna play correctly, so you need to restart the preview. And you can see I'm using a custom color from my style guide, and it's doing the transition for me as well. So I'm gonna do the same for the other card, and maybe this one I'm gonna set the background 9, so we have these really nice effects. And what I can suggest is to experiment as much as you can with these animations, with these states, and create really interesting results for your design. You have to treat this almost like a design tool, because there's nothing like this out there. For values like the blend mode and the color animation, as well as the 3D rotation effect, these are some of the stuff that you won't find in most design tools or even prototyping tools. And to be able to manipulate quite easily in the development tool that your engineer can use, I think is really, really powerful. And oftentimes as designers, we struggle to create something really nice in a prototyping tool or in a design tool, just to realize that when it translates to the development tool, it's completely different or it's out of scope. and that is so demoralizing as a designer. So this is your chance to take control of how it's going to look like, how it's going to be styled, how it's going to be animated, and also for the engineers to really understand kind of the concept of design behind all of these decisions and to make the right ones so that you can release your app quicker. Before we go, the last thing I want to show you is that the spring animation is also customizable. It's pretty complex, but I do want to show you. So we can go to the documentation and you can see we have a bunch of these values, such as the mass, the stiffness, the damping, and the initial velocity. So you can definitely play around with these values and start putting, let's say, for some of these long properties, you might want to rewrite them and use the auto completion, as you can see right here, and it's going to provide all of these values that comes with these modifiers. So here, you know, you can play around with the mass and check obviously the default value. I'm not super familiar with these values, and I suspect that a lot of designers are not, because this is a development tool. It's different from a lot of the values that you're gonna find in prototyping tools, because each system have their own set of you know, velocity and damping and ratios. So one thing I can definitely suggest is to look at the default values. So you can see 1, 100, 10, and then 0. So we can definitely use that as a starting point. So 1 for mass, 100 for stiffness, damping is going to be 10, initial velocity is going to be 0. So this is the default values, and we can play around from here. So for example, if I want to make it, you know, faster, so I can set like 1 for initial velocity or 100. So you can already see some movement going on. So I'm going to reset this and I'm going to leave the code so that you can take this and experiment with all of these values and animations yourself, and especially using your own designs, because I think you're going to have a lot of fun. In the next session, we're going to learn how to add gestures and how to pair them with animations so that we can create something even more interesting. So I'll see you in the next session.